Thanks for being here. Pull up a chair. I want you to stay with me for the next few minutes because what I'm about to share with you, it stopped me cold. And I've been doing this work for a long time. She came in on a Tuesday, a regular session, nothing unusual scheduled. But about 8 minutes in, she stopped mid-sentence and said, I need to tell you something I've never told anyone. I've heard that before. Most therapists have. You settle in, you wait, you expect something difficult but manageable. A secret, a regret, something buried. What she told me instead was this. The man she had been married to for 19 years, the man she had built a life with, bought a house with, raised 2 daughters with, did not exist. Not the way she knew him. His name wasn't real, his family wasn't real. The college he claimed to have attended didn't have any record of him. The job he claimed to have held for the first 4 years of their marriage, she had just found out was a complete fabrication. He had been going somewhere every morning and coming home every evening, and she still does not know where. And when she finally confronted him about it, he didn't deny it. He just looked at her very calmly and said, There are things about me you were never supposed to find out. Then he walked out of the house. That was 6 days before she came to see me. She hadn't heard from him since. Before we go any further, I want to be clear about something. Every story I share here comes from the work I do in my practice, and every detail has been changed to protect the privacy of the people involved. What I talk about reflects real emotional and psychological experiences, but your own situation is your own. No two people, no two families, no two relationships are the same. If anything you hear today is touching something deep for you, please reach out to a licensed professional in your area. What I offer here is perspective, not prescription. Her name is Renata. She's 43 years old, originally from outside Columbus, Ohio, though she and her husband settled in Raleigh, North Carolina about 12 years ago. She works as a pharmaceutical compliance officer, detail-oriented by nature, trained to catch discrepancies, trained to follow paper trails. That detail matters. She has 2 daughters. One is 16, one is 13. She described herself when she first came to me about 8 months ago for anxiety and what she called low-grade chronic stress as someone who was very good at keeping things together. She was not wrong about that. But she was also, as I came to understand, someone who had been kept very carefully in the dark. I want to take you back to the beginning, because the beginning matters. Renata started seeing me originally because she was having trouble sleeping and noticed she was grinding her teeth. Classic stress presentation. We talked about her workload, her marriage, her kids. She described her husband, Marcus, in mostly warm terms. Reliable, steady, a little emotionally unavailable, but nothing alarming. She said he could be distant. She said there were conversations he simply refused to have. She chalked it up to personality. A lot of people do. In our early sessions, a few things caught my attention that I noted but didn't push too hard on yet. She mentioned that Marcus had no contact with his family. None. He had told her early in their relationship that he had cut them off. A difficult childhood, an abusive father, estrangement that started before they met. She accepted that. She never met anyone from his past. No friends from before they were together. No old coworkers. No college roommates. No one. He had explained all of it away, and she had accepted all of it. When you love someone, you often take their story on faith. That's not naivety, that's trust, but it does create a very particular kind of blind spot. The first real crack came about 4 months into our work together. She came in one afternoon and told me she had been cleaning out a drawer, a junk drawer, she called it, the kind every household has, and she found an old passport, Marcus's passport. But the name on it wasn't Marcus's name. It was a different last name entirely. She'd assumed it was an error or an old legal name he'd never mentioned. She asked him about it that night. He told her it was from before a legal name change, something he'd done years ago to distance himself from his father. She said the explanation felt thin to her, but she didn't push. She told me, I didn't want to be the kind of wife who doesn't trust her husband. I hear that from people more than you might think. She let it go. She told herself it made sense. She moved on. But something had shifted. She started noticing small things she had trained herself not to notice before. phone calls he took outside, a second email account she glimpsed once when he left his laptop open, a business trip to Denver that, when she mentioned it casually to a colleague who knew someone at Marcus's firm, turned out to have no record of his attendance at the conference he said he was going to. Small things, each one explainable on its own. Together, they started to form a shape she didn't want to look at directly. About 2 months after the passport incident, she did something she had never done in 19 years of marriage. She hired someone, a private investigator. She told me this with real shame in her voice. She said she felt like a cliché, like she was starring in some bad movie. I told her that people who hire investigators are usually not being paranoid. They're usually responding to something real that they haven't been able to name yet. She cried a little when I said that. I think it was the first time someone had validated the instinct she had been suppressing for years. The investigator came back to her with a report about 3 weeks later. I asked her what was in it, and she was quiet for a long moment. She folded her hands in her lap. She said, "He has another family." I waited, she continued. Not a girlfriend, not an affair. A family. A woman in a city I won't name. 2 children, boys ages 9 and 11, and a house in a neighborhood that was, by all accounts, almost identical to the one Renata shared with him in Raleigh. He had been maintaining 2 full households for, as best the investigator could determine, at least 12 years. He was using a variation of his real name with the other family. He was splitting his time, his money, his attention. He had 2 lives that were running in complete parallel, neither one knowing about the other. She sat in my office with that report in her lap, and she said, "I keep thinking about what's real. Our wedding, was that real? Our daughters, obviously they're real, but does he love them the way I thought? All those years, where was he actually? What was real?" I did not have easy answers for her. I still don't. But here is where the story turns into something I was not prepared for. A week after she confronted him, the confrontation I described at the beginning, where he said, "There are things about me you were never supposed to find out," and walked out, she got a call, not from Marcus, from a woman. The woman from the other household, the other wife. It turns out Marcus had contacted her, too, the same night he walked out on Renata. He had told the other woman the same thing, that there were things she was never supposed to know. He had disappeared on them both simultaneously. And the other woman, her name doesn't matter, but she existed, she was real, she had 9 and 11-year-old boys. She was calling Renata not in anger. She was calling because she was scared. She said, "I think he planned this. I think he always planned to disappear." Both women sitting with the wreckage, neither one knowing what he actually was or what he actually wanted. The investigators, the lawyers, the institutions, none of them had a clean answer either, because the paper trail was deliberately obscured in ways that suggested significant premeditation. This was not someone who snapped. This was someone who had, for an unknown number of years, been constructing an exit. Renata came to me the day after that phone call. She looked like she hadn't slept. She probably hadn't. She said, "I don't know who I've been for the last 19 years. If my marriage wasn't real, who was I in it?" That question is one of the most psychologically profound things a person can ask, and it's not rhetorical. She genuinely didn't know. When your sense of self has been built, even partially around a relationship that turns out to have been constructed on deception, you don't just lose the relationship, you lose the version of yourself that existed inside it. That is a specific kind of grief that most people don't have language for. It's not just heartbreak, it's closer to an identity rupture. I explained to her that what she was experiencing how to name, actually several names in clinical literature, but the core of it was this. When the story we've been telling ourselves about our life turns out to be wrong, the brain treats it like a loss, not just an emotional loss, a neurological one. The neural pathways that were built around that story don't just dissolve,
they persist for a while, and that can feel like grief, like confusion, like a strange kind of homesickness for something that never existed quite the way you thought it did. Together, we looked at what she actually knew to be true. Her daughters were real. Her work was real. The friends she had made in Raleigh, on her own, independent of Marcus, they were real. The love she had given, even if it had been received by someone who was not who he claimed to be, was still real. That love had come from her. It didn't become false just because he was. We talked a great deal about attachment theory, specifically what happens when the primary attachment figure in an adult's life is revealed to have been fundamentally unsafe. Her nervous system had been organized around a person who, it turned out, had been managing her perception of reality for nearly 20 decades. That's not a small thing to recover from. It's not a matter of just deciding to move on. The body holds that kind of experience in a very particular way. I reminded her that the disorientation she was feeling, the sense that she couldn't trust her own perceptions, couldn't trust her own judgment, is one of the most common after effects of long-term covert deception. It is not a character flaw. It is not stupidity. People who are skilled at maintaining double lives are, by definition, skilled at making the people around them feel secure. Her trust was not weakness. It was a reasonable human response to someone who had worked very hard to earn it under false pretenses. We also began to talk, carefully, about what her daughters needed. They were going to need the truth at some point, an age-appropriate version of it. They were going to ask questions she didn't have full answers to, and she was going to have to hold space for their grief while managing her own. That is one of the hardest things a parent can be asked to do. I told her she didn't have to figure all of it out today. She just had to get through today. Slowly, we started working on what I call, in plain terms, rebuilding the floor. When everything feels uncertain, you identify what is solid, what you know, what you can rely on. You start there, not with the big questions, not with the full scope of what happened, but with the small, concrete things that are true. I have my daughters. I go to work. I sleep in my house. The floor is still there. You build from the floor. Renata is still in the process of that rebuilding. She is not okay yet, but she is not where she was 6 days after he walked out. She's asking different questions now. Not who was he, but who am I going to be? And that shift, small as it might sound, is everything. I've been sitting with her story this week in a way that I don't always carry cases home with me. There's something about it that I think touches a fear that many of us have, but rarely say out loud, that the life we're living might contain something we don't know about, that the people we love the most might be in some part unknown to us. It's an uncomfortable thing to sit with, but it also raises a question that I think is worth turning over. Have you ever had a moment where someone you deeply trusted turned out to be someone you didn't fully know? And if so, how did you find your footing again? I'd genuinely like to know. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. This community has shown up for each other in ways that have honestly surprised me, and your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. If this video reached something in you, please give it a like. It helps more people find these conversations when they need them most. And if you're new here, subscribing takes 2 seconds and means you won't miss what we talk about next. Thank you for trusting me with your time. Take good care of yourself this week. I mean that.